Welcome to Olfactory Odyssey. We're back for our second episode. We're excited to be here with you. And just a reminder for those of you who might be joining for the first time, this podcast is all about our sense of smell, hence the name Olfactory Odyssey. So we're glad to have you here today. Last time we did our pilot episode to get us oriented to where we're headed on this podcast. Today, we get to go a little bit deeper into the science of olfaction. We're glad to have you with us. We do want to dive into the science with you. We also recognize that we are neither doctors nor researchers into the sense of smell, at least not by trade.
But we got Google.
That's right.
Listen.
We have Google. And ChatGPT, and also some academic articles too that we were able to read to gather some information that we really think is going to be exciting for you all to hear with us. So we're going to go through some of those things just to capture your imagination and maybe get you interested in this as much as we are. So let's start off with the first thing today. This is a phenomenal fact. I find it to be fascinating. Let's see where it takes us. Let's see where it takes us on this journey, on this odyssey together. Mm-hmm. So the first thing that you should know about the olfaction process is that the nasal cavity, right? This is where our sense of smell is centered. If you didn't know, we do all have noses, and we probably have some familiarity with this. But just in case you didn't know, the olfactory process starts in our noses. Now, this is the only place in our body where the central nervous system makes direct contact with the external environment. Did you know that?
I got a fact for you that I'm about to ruin your life, okay? You're
Okay,
going to see
bring
where
it
I'm
on.
going with. Did you know that when you breathe, you can have tiny molecules? Basically, what you're breathing, tiny molecules enter your nose in order for your body to be able to sense it with like the receptors. Again, I'm not a doctor or a scientist, but again, I had Google, and that's something that I Googled that ruined my life a little bit, especially when I go use to public bathrooms, because tiny particles have to go up your nostrils in order for your brain to process what you're smelling.
That's right.
And so I'm going to leave you with that. Enjoy that. Think about me when you go to the public bathrooms. Take that back. Please don't.
That's such a great image for us to have as we go into restrooms, to be like, oh yes, that odorous fragrance reminds me of Sarah.
Yeah, let's strike that from the record. That's one thing I said. I immediately regret it. Immediate regret.
When you think of Sarah, think of public bathrooms.
Listen, that is not one of my smartest things I've said. Please know that there will probably be more.
This will be the blooper, right? That's the
blooper reel.
I hope this is a blooper reel, because that is. Please
So-
do not think of me when you go to a public restroom, but think of my fact.
Yeah. And so to Sarah's point, when you're smelling, say, the fragrance of coffee in the morning as you're waking up, as it's being brewed, which is one of my favorite smells. I won't say it's my favorite smell for reasons we discussed last time, but I will say it is one that I am becoming more and more excited about smelling each day.
Ever the politician.
Okay,
what
so
a great response.
One really quick side note: I make Sarah's coffee in the morning every day,
Yes,
and
he
so
does.
I grind up the beans and everything, and without fail, I'll take the cover off. We use an electric grinder right now. I know that there are a lot of opinions about that. People who like coffee grinders would say maybe it's not the best. Suffice it to say, I have the grounds. I will take a nice whiff, and then I'll scoop it in to start making the coffee. But I look forward to that every day.
The best part of waking up
Yes, is
Folgers in your
is
cup.
Folgers in your cup. We are not sponsored by Folgers.
Not at all.
But what is happening there is that those fine little molecules of coffee beans that have been ground up are actually entering into my nose, making contact, and then that's how my brain is processing that smell. And that's true for all of us, which I think is just fascinating.
I think it's kind of incredible, the fact that our bodies are built in such a way that that's how our receptors pick up smell. I think smell is often something that I took for granted. I think especially during COVID. My mom lost her sense of smell during COVID. And I remember that's something that she really expressed having a hard time with, like drinking coffee, eating food. And for me, like if I ever get a sinus infection and I can't breathe, I can't taste anything. So it's
Yeah.
it's the sense of smell is often something we don't think of as important.
Yes.
Yet it is crucial to a lot of things. I mean, think about when how important it is for our survival.
Yes.
Often I use my nose. I'm like, is this food okay? Let me sniff it.
That's right.
Right. It's not just how it looks, but if it smells off,
That's right.
right? It's this design of how do we protect ourselves from eating things that will hurt us. Even with seafood, you smell it and something that's off, you don't put it in your mouth,
That's
right?
right.
Yeah.
So it's important to have things that don't smell good
Yeah.
so that you don't eat it.
That's right.
Children don't know about that. They'll just everything. But
Yeah. So it's interesting you bring that up. I wonder if there's something exploratory in our genetic makeup that makes us want to experience lots of things either through the nasal passages or through oral canal, right? To like test it, taste it, see what it is so that we can track it in the olfactory process, catalog it, and then know, okay, this is bad, this is good. I wonder how much that is innate and passed down and how much of that is picked up through sensory experience as we live out. I don't know the answer to that question.
I think that's a great point. Actually, as you both were speaking, I was thinking about, even with smells and how you talk about protecting ourselves. But I thought about how it can be so subjective
Yes.
yes.
and how even our smell can be socialized.
yes.
Say more about that, PJ.
I think about when it comes to colors, for example.
Yeah.
We're socialized to think that pink is for girls, blue is for boys.
Right.
Right? Because that's what's surrounded by us. But if you're from different cultures, some smells are going to be like, oh, this smells great. There's a comedian, an old school comedian, that talks about he went on a trip to a different country, and he was in the taxi cab, and the taxi driver was like, "What's that smell?" And then he was like, "What's that smell?" And then next thing they were like, "You stink!" And they both pointed at each other. But it just goes to how we're socialized that certain aromas and smells deal with culture. And
Yes.
it's very similar to taste, right?
Yes.
So I think it's just all connected on how we're brought up, what may smell great to you. I mean, that's why people use different body washes, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It goes back to the association, right?
That's right.
Where like, what are these particular smells? What are they being associated with?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And what's either the memory connected to it, the cultural significance connected to
Yes.
it?
Yes.
Where just again, we're really expanding on the idea that smells, scents in general are so much more than just something that we should ignore. There's so
Yeah.
much power in recognizing scent and how our emotions are impacted by scent as well.
Yeah.
I mean, think about in the morning, some people are even like before they have bringing back the coffee idea,
Right.
they're like, I smell the coffee and
Right.
I feel awake and I know that I'm anticipating having that first sip, right?
Yeah.
And immediately it kind of triggers that it's time to wake up. And immediately, right? So people have their coffee brewing, they start smelling the aroma, and now they've associated the smell of the aroma with now it's time to wake up. Now it's time to get my day started.
Yes.
Right? So it's like they're just connections to such broader themes that we don't recognize. And I think doing this podcast, I'm grateful because, again, I was one of those people that didn't recognize. I'm not trying to sit here being snobby like, oh, yeah,
Sure.
I recognized all of this before, right?
I did.
PJ, I'm sure you did.
JK.
Exactly. So I think being forced to, force sounds a little aggressive. Being, let's say having the opportunity to explore the importance of smells
Yeah.
has been great.
Kobe, you were mentioning, again, just how smell connects with our brains. And our
Yes.
thoughts. Can you go back to that a little bit and
Yes.
talk about the experience, maybe the memory, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff?
PJ, you read my mind because that's exactly what I wanted to talk about next. So, the way that it works is, so we have those cells in the nasal cavity that pull into the olfactory bulb, is the part of the brain that is essentially taking in the molecules, transmitting that into data, reinterpreting it, communicating that to the brain. The brain then just sends it to the body, and then you have your sense experience of what smell is all about for us. Now, what's interesting is that, so this goes back to the concept that this is a unique sense that we have, right? Now, with other senses that we have, touch, taste, sight, so on and so forth, right? The way that connects to the brain is somewhat indirect. This is a direct pathway to the brain. And so the parts that it impacts most closely are the amygdala and I think the hippocampus, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure those are the two places that it directly pipes into. And those centers of the brain really impact our memory, memory banks, so the processing and the creation of memory and then the storing of the memory. It also impacts our emotional state and how we process emotion, right? The limbic system is what this is called. And the limbic system really impacts your emotions. So to go back to what we were talking about, waking up in the morning, right? The best part of waking up is right, some sort of coffee in your cup, right? To go with the rhyme, right? The reason that is so true is that you're now taking that association of this compound, the coffee, right, that helps you to wake up, to engage in the day more fully because you're, waking up from a tired posture and going into the day, and it makes you feel alive. And so your brain goes and says, oh yeah, not only does this smell good because it may be objectively a good scent, which we should talk about. Is there such a thing, right? We don't know about that yet. But it's saying that, yeah, this is something that's going to help me through the day. Oh, I'm feeling calm, or maybe feeling excited, but there's some sort of positive association that's being triggered by that.
So what's interesting, Colby, is that as we're talking about coffee, I find myself having to swallow more because I'm just salivating just at the thought, even though I've had way too much caffeine today. Too much. Starbucks is taking my money. Sorry, babe. But, sorry, budget. But anyways, back on track, just the idea of how much, even just talking about it, and like recognizing the smell of it, because I'm not smelling it right now, but just the idea of what we're talking about, like I'm already salivating at even the thought. Just when we're not even talking about drinking it, we're talking about smelling it. My body already, because it's just such a common smell,
right? And
that association, and I'm already just salivating at the thought.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, man, as you were speaking again, just different things come to mind, right? Especially when you're breaking down the science of it, you know. Thank you. We have Kobe Nye, the science guy here. But really, I think about my uncle, actually, who's a retired firefighter.
Yep.
And I remember him telling me to not go into, like, so I've worked at colleges and doing different things, and there's been some emergencies where people may not realize there's certain smells that may be associated with those emergencies.
Yes.
So my uncle would tell me when he would be, arrive to a scene where there may somebody's body parts may be different places and blood is everywhere. He would talk about the smell.
Wow.
And that smell of death.
Yes.
I think through that trauma that people may have to work through because of smells.
Yeah.
And now, Sarah, you may have some more expertise in this than I do. But I just think that's something for us to highlight, that sometimes we may be triggered by a smell and not even realize it.
Yes.
Because of the science that you just talked about.
Yes, that's absolutely right. And just for the audience, so you know, Sarah is studying to become a counselor, clinician. Would you say what's the right term that you would use?
Therapist.
A therapist. Thank you.
Yes, marriage and family therapy. Shout out to Fairfield University.
Yes. Thank you, Fairfield.
Yeah.
I remember there was a moment a couple months ago. I got a soap. This one was Dapper Yankee. It was not Dr. Squatch. I also like Dapper Yankee. And if you have any other recommendations out there, viewers, please let me know.
Please don't let them know.
No, but please do let me know.
We have... I said it last episode. I'm going to bring it up. I promised I'm not jaded. I'm not jaded. We have a shelf designated for all of his soap that are weighing down our little... It's weighing on the shelf, so... You know what? I know it makes you happy. You guys can recommend, I guess, but I'll deal with it.
Much. And you know what? Reviews will come out on all those things as well, so you'll benefit from it too. They'll benefit more from that than our Starbucks, right?
Actually, Starbucks is delicious. Anyways,
I have to agree with Sarah. Starbucks is very beneficial.
Politician.
We're not sponsored by
Stay in your
Starbucks.
lane.
No, we're not.
Yet.
Yet. That's right. All of these things are yet. They're conditional. Maybe we'll get some sponsors at some point. Anyway, so this happened a couple months ago, where I got this soap and I started using it, and Sarah immediately walked in, and at first all she said to me was, I really don't like that. Can you not use that around me? And I was like, that's weird, because this is my favorite of the batch that I got. I got four different types at that time, and I really like this one. So I was like, okay, that's fine. Now, I had used it maybe a few weeks later again when she was around, and this time she was pretty upset at me for having used it. She came in and said, no, you need to put it away right now. And I'm like, hey, I know that you don't like it. I was really hoping I could use it. Like, I'm not asking you to use it with me. What's going on? And she goes, I don't know what memory this is tied to for me right now, because I don't know specifics. And frankly, I don't want to know specifics. I can tell you that it is a bad memory that this is tied to something in that soap. I don't know what it is, but it was not okay, and that's all you need to know. And I said, okay, that's fine. So I packed it up, put it away, and we haven't used it since.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing to see how quickly that hit for you.
Yeah, and I think smelling that was really confusing because, like you said, I didn't know where that was coming from, but I just remember the visceral reaction of immediately my body was like in fight or flight.
Yep.
It was in fight or flight, and I was like, what the heck? Like, I'm just smelling something, right?
Yeah.
And so, and it's funny too because like we were talking about it being a subjective experience,
right.
where for you you're like, I'm loving this soap. This is
You're
some
right,
good
right.
soap.
I thought it was amazing.
like
It was my
sniffing
favorite
it.
batch.
It feels great, and I'm like, put that away. Get that away from me,
Yes.
right? And then I think just having grace with being like, okay, I don't get this.
Mm-hmm.
And this was before the podcast, before we really got into the nitty gritty with like, the science around smells, but at least like you understood, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I think about lilies for you. That's the first thing that I always think about, that I'm always protective with like flowers. I'm like, don't smell this, right? Because of the association. And what PJ was talking about too, about his uncle and having to go through those moments and smell and knowing what that smells like, right? I think that is what's wild to me, that not only has he smelled it, but he can recognize that smell, right? If he were to walk into a building, let's say if he was canvassing a scene or going inside, all he had to do was smell and he knew what was coming, right?
Yeah. And it's funny because I remember something happened where I had to address it was a suicidal attempt, right?
Wow.
And I didn't have to go into the room. And when I told him what I was addressing, he was like, Peach, I'm glad you didn't have to go in there.
Yeah.
So that you didn't have to see it or smell it. It could, once going past those things, those smells again can transport you back to that memory of that trauma. Yeah. So I think that's something that sometimes we don't even realize, that there was trauma, that there was things that we have to work through. And sometimes it's something for us to reflect on. Like, what haven't we gotten over subconsciously that we really haven't dealt with when it comes and we're triggered by that smell.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Sarah, if you ever decide to pursue a PhD, perhaps we've found a good dissertation subject for you, right? Like in the process of becoming well and dealing with trauma, could there be, it may be hard to distinguish what it is, but if you knew, or if you could figure out what are the scents that are associated to this, could there be a way that you incorporate that into the process of helping people heal in trauma? I don't know.
Well, listen, doctoral students, if we have any that are like listening to our podcast, please feel free to, put in some little facts that if you are studying this, or if maybe this is something that's interesting, right? I would love to hear, I guess, the associations of smells and how they impact us. Because again, we know very much basic level. This is really interesting. I actually want to dive deeper. And maybe, in the future we'll do another episode and maybe
100%.
we can invite someone. That'd be really fun.
Yes. Yes.
But I think right now it's great that we're being able to have some conversation around this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it'd be really interesting to study that. I can think about aromatherapy, thinking
yes,
about
right.
Yes.
How that's something that I've been thinking about, or how the way that therapists use space and how intentional they are about crafting certain smells and having specific lighting and placement, right? Also, side note, I'm very much into my first semester, so I am not claiming any expertise at all. Learning a lot, great, but I just know that from experience of working with like my own therapist, right? Yeah. And how everything is very intentional. And I guess maybe something to get from this episode is that if maybe you find an emotion coming up for you and you're around a certain smell, like have grace with yourself. Don't be like, oh, why am I feeling this? Or maybe if others are around you and you just can't explain it, don't beat yourself up. If you need to remove yourself from that space, space. You don't owe anybody an explanation, or just being like, hey, I'm not feeling right now. I just need to take a step away and, have your boundaries.
It's interesting as we think about how smells can transport us to the past. I also wonder, how can smells transport us to the future?
Interesting.
And what I mean by that is I think about, different goals, dreams, and visions that we may have.
Yeah.
Or even places that we may want to visit, right?
Yeah.
It's something I haven't tried, but it has me thinking now, well, do I find something from that country that I want to go to?
Right.
And smell it. Say, you know what? I'm going to smell this in person one day. Like be there if it's in Paris at the Louvre looking at Monet's art.
Yeah. No, I really like that. I like that you mentioned that because it's something to look forward to. Like if you're planning a trip and it's like, I wonder what this meal is going to smell like.
Yes.
Or maybe even introducing yourself to different cultures, and even if like not, and I think also not feeling guilt if you immediately are not familiar or don't like the smell, right? Again, it's all about being respectful about certain smells of
That's
different cultures, right? Where even if maybe it's not appealing to you or pleasant, don't be like, this is disgusting, gross, right? Maybe be like, take a second, kind of get yourself accustomed to a different type of smell because you didn't grow up around that smell. You have no, background or connotation to that smell, right? How can we use this to help us aspire to something, right? To like, ooh, I'm going to smell this in the future and have that hope and that dream, something to chase after. Yeah. I've never thought about that. So that's really interesting, PJ.
So, really we got out of the vision boards and have a scent board. I don't know.
Hey, a scent board.
I like that.
Kobe will have like multiple soaps and be like, I aspire.
Yes. Well, this feels like a good time to kind of segue into our next little fact that we have for the day.
Interesting.
Yes. And so the second fact that I want to bring in is kind of a collection of facts, which is probably true for the first and the third one that we'll do as well. But it is this, that you may think, viewers, you may think this too, that your experience when eating food, when tasting things, this could be drinking as well, is primarily a function of what's happening on your taste buds and your tongue. But the reality is the vast majority of our sense of what I'll call our sensory experience of consumption through our mouths. That's what I'm going to say, because I don't want to say taste, because that is a separate sensory experience. But the majority of that sensory experience is actually olfaction. So taste is broken down into what we know of right now as 5 different qualities. Our tongues can sense salty, sweet, bitter.
Umami.
Yep, umami is the 5th one, and sour, I believe, is the other one, right? So salty, sweet, sour, bitter, and umami, right? Those are the big 5.
What is umami?
Umami is like a meaty sensation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you would get that like if you're eating like a ribeye steak and you have that kind of the fat globules that are going onto your tongue. Like there's.
I thought that was like an inside joke between you and Sarah. Like,
no, that's
umami.
real.
Well, I guess.
No, umami's real.
The umami. Oh my. It was shout out to the cooking shows actually.
Yes.
Right? They're like, when the judges would be like, we can sense that umami flavor.
Right.
And I was like,
Gotcha.
umami? What's that?
Yeah.
I was like, what's that?
Yep, that's what that is. And so it's a particular sensation. It's a quality of ingesting food. But a lot of the power is actually coming from the molecules, which are now inside your mouth, going back up through the nasal cavity. So we'll get gross here for just a second. Mm-hmm. I'm sure many of us have experience with allergies and with post-nasal drip when you feel that nasty mucus kind of rolling down the back of your neck. Okay, this is the glorious opposite of that.
Opposite.
Yes, when you have the delectable molecules of the food or drink that you're having go back up the other direction, again, hit your nasal cavities, like what we've been talking about, and wham, you have your full, robust sense, that sensory experience that you're having when you're eating or drinking, because now it's incorporating both your sense of smell and your sense of taste. It combines, and you have something beautiful. And so because I know that you both are itching to say something right now, but before I hand it off and continue the conversation, I will say, what I find interesting is when I have a difference of opinion between what I like the smell of and I like the taste of. And I'll give you an example. It's from earlier today. Sarah and I went out to the grocery store last night, and as we were looking, we saw a couple different sales.
I know what he's going to say.
You know exactly what I'm going to say. She's like, hey, you like sauerkraut, right? I do. I love sauerkraut. The hot dog is simply a vehicle for the kraut to get into my mouth for my pure enjoyment. Or other sandwiches, which is what I did for lunch today. I had a turkey sandwich with sauerkraut, and it was fantastic. Now, what's interesting here is that the sauerkraut, first, is an acquired taste. I will say that. Second, I love the taste of sauerkraut. If you smell it, it is not a pleasant aroma. And so what's fascinating to me is that somehow there's this combination of that maybe bitter. I don't know if you would say that there's saltiness in the fermentation of the cabbage. So sauerkraut is just fermented cabbage. I don't know if you'd say there's a salty, but maybe because of the turkey that goes with it or the hot dog that goes with it, you have that saltiness, you have that umami from the hot dog, and you have that fermentation all together. Wow, I could eat that just, by the spoonful. But smelling it, not that interested. And vice versa with coffee. Oh, the aroma of coffee is so good. It took me a while to say, I'm going to drink this and enjoy this without other flavorings, right? You add some cream in there, you add some sugar in there, totally different ball game. That sweetness takes it to a different level. But do I like coffee in and of itself? I do now. That was not always the case. It was like, the bitterness has thrown me off. I don't love it, but the smell is so good. So I find that fascinating, that the interplay between the taste and the smell can yield different results than if you plug your nose and eat something. And maybe I like the saltiness to it or the bitterness to it, but I can't sense the smell. But if I sniff it, I like it. I don't know. It's just interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
Can you do that again and just talk like that?
You want me to plug my nose and just talk like that?
No, that's a great point. But very similarly, I'm like that with coffee as well.
Yeah.
Like, again, I like the smell, but when I go to Starbucks, I mean, I'm getting pumpkin spice, crisp, salted caramel. It's never just a black coffee thing for me.
Yeah.
I could never. That's too much. Sorry, I'm very much. I think I'm acquiring the taste of enjoying more of a bitter coffee, but never by itself.
Yeah.
I stand firmly on that.
So you like the additives. You like the caramel or the brown sugar, I think is your favorite, right?
It is my favorite.
That's your favorite.
Yes, I stand by that. The sweeter, the better.
And don't get me wrong. Most of the time, I'm adding sweeteners in it, too. That being said, I still am okay with a regular coffee. Hit me with an espresso. I'm all about it. I'm all about that espresso. Which sounds weird, right? Because it's a higher concentration. But, it's so good.
But then I think the coffee, we talked about this a little bit at the last podcast. I talked about a memory of my grandparents.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Of waking up and smelling coffee. So again, it triggers memory. Back to your first point today.
Here's a question for us to ponder. I wonder if, say, your first experience growing up, you just are trying foods and you don't like it, right? But later on, through the context of something nice, like, say, a first date or whatever, you end up trying the same food again. Now, I would wager that you probably won't like it that time again because you didn't like it the first time. It's not something you're accustomed to, whatever. But I wonder if after that, can your preference for a taste or a smell that was previously not a good one for you, unattractive, just not something that was exciting to you, I wonder if that can transform simply because of the association.
Well, I think the first thing that pops up in my brain actually is how much I hated anything minty, and now I love it. I think this was the biggest shift for me when I felt like a little kid to just an older little kid. So of course, listen, in my mind, in that, like, I would say around 8. How old was I when I switched to mint? Maybe I'm exposing myself here. But anyways, when I was younger, I only liked the fruity type of toothpaste.
Yeah.
If I had to switch to the mint, I remember my mom would try to switch me to the mint. I remember this. I was like, what is this?
How old were you? We want to know.
PJ, we're gonna,
Were you 16?
That's crazy. Imagine that I brushed my teeth.
Last week.
All right, relax. You're not gonna expose me that much. But I just remember that shift. I remember having to move from like that fruity. I remember enjoying the fruity toothpaste, and all of a sudden I was like, "This is disgusting." And I think, honestly, that was around 7, maybe 6, 7.
Okay.
Right, it's not that bad. I mean,
No, it's not bad.
maybe even older. Truthfully, I don't remember, but I remember I'm old enough to remember, and I'm having that switch to mint. And at first it was like, okay, but then now I can't live without it. Now I love like the mintiness of something, right? And I prefer it. But before, I just remember being like vehemently against anything minty. I was like, this is atrocious. I think, honestly, I still didn't enjoy it that much that I only ever ate fruity gum. I think it was when I was like 14, which maybe I'm exposing myself, that I switched to more of like a mint-based gum until I can't chew gum anymore because I have T&J issues, but whatever. But yeah, that was when I switched. And I think the association for me switched when I became more aware of wanting to smell good. I think that was a big thing. 'Cause I remember first episode I talked about like BO and being super aware of like my own smell and being like, I want to make sure I always smell good, right? Yeah. And now switching to, wait a second, because like the fruity gum only lasts so long, and even then sometimes you can have that like weird after. It's like I don't even know how to describe it. It's like this aftertaste, and it's not the most pleasant of odor. Maybe for some people they love it, who knows? And then I switched to the mint because I was like, I want to always smell good, and I want to make sure my breath is minty fresh, right? All the commercials, minty fresh, right?
You were socialized.
I was just gonna say that. Back to the socialization. Wow. Wow.
Actually, you know what? I mean, I'm thinking about taste now, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Again, but back to the socialization. Has anyone ever been to World of Coke?
Are we talking about like Coca-Cola?
Coca-Cola,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there's one in Atlanta, and I went,
Yeah.
and they have all these flavored sodas from all across the world.
Oh man.
And it's great to a certain extent
Okay.
because then you get to
Tell me
taste
more.
some of the sodas that are popular. And there's one, I can't remember the name now. You know, those that are watching, please feel free to type in if you remember this soda. I believe it's from Italy. It is disgusting.
So we're breaking our own rules here for a second.
I believe. I'm using I statements here.
I'm using hashtag.
I believe it's disgusting. Someone else may love it. But again, it's culture and the things that you like and things that you taste and things that you smell. This World of Coke, again, it's like 20 different sodas.
Yeah.
I mean, like that, like a strawberry, kiwi, and they go by different continents. Like you're able to
Yeah.
see and taste things. And I have to say, Japan has some cool stuff.
Yes.
And South America has some cool stuff.
Yep.
Come on now,
So-
shout out to South America. You know how to make things taste good.
So yeah, but again, it goes back to those socializations of
Yeah.
what smells good, what tastes good, and how to connect to our olfactory bulb.
Yes. Yes, sir. Yes,
Bringing it back.
sir. Yeah, that's great.
So, are there any other medical facts we need to know today?
I think we need to take a quick pause because, yes, I can't remember what the next one was. It's on my list, though, so let me go. So, yeah, PJ, we do have one more quick fact that we want to go through before we wrap up our time. The last fact is just about the power of our ability to pick up on scents. Now, Sarah, you touched upon this earlier when you talked about the need for our olfactory senses to be there for the purpose of survival. This comes
Yes.
into that really well. So the reality is that for some for some fragrances, our noses are able to pick up a concentration of less than 1/100th of a nanomolar. Okay, so I wish I could give you a scale for how small that is, but it is infinitesimally small. That's like a ridiculously tiny amount of a substance that needs to make contact in order for us to be like, oh, yep, that's what that is. I think that the one that I looked at that was that small was a bell pepper. So you barely need any contact with a bell pepper to be able to say, yep, that's what that is. I can distinguish that. And so connected to that, we're able to distinguish lots of different smells, but many smells are actually the composition of multiple different scents or scent molecules coming together in conglomeration to produce something. So there are a number of individual molecules that smell a certain way. But then if you just change the chemical component slightly, it'll smell like something different. And if you add other things together, it will make its own unique smell, right? So like a brownie, for example, right?
Great
if you think
smell.
about it, is a great smell.
It's delicious.
And if you put all so you have eggs, butter, sugar, some combination of those things all put together, you end up with the smell of a brownie. Chocolate, I should have said cocoa. That's an obvious one. But that gives you the scent of a brownie, which is obviously a conglomeration, but you can identify it as, oh, that's a brownie. So that's another really interesting fact that we can distinguish incredibly well. Okay.
I feel like I know what
ahead.
you're going to say, but I want
Go
to
ahead.
say it because we're weak in comparison to other species.
Ooh.
So
Is that not what you're going to say?
So you're exactly in line with where I was going. You're
Okay.
right, and you're wrong.
Please
So,
educate me, I
okay.
guess.
So there are other species. I know that you're thinking dog, right? Because we have Ranger at home
And cats.
and cats.
Shout
right?
out to cat people. You know?
And cats. So have a very good ability to detect scents, but humans have just as good, if not better, capability than some other animals. I can't remember if dogs, we'll have to fact check on that one, but have a better ability to distinguish between smells. So dogs can smell something way further away. Their ability to perceive is much greater than ours. If I'm not mistaken, we'll have to fact check on this one, but they can smell things from farther off with lesser concentrations, but our distinguishing capability is actually very, very good in comparison to even other animals that have more cells doing the olfaction process.
But I mean, what about, I want to push back slightly because what about dogs that are trained in search, right? They're trained to be able to detect something. So I don't know.
That is a very good point. We'll have to look into that and maybe get back to you on that about what the difference is. I know that we have really good distinguishing capabilities. That being said, you're right. We don't have a human unit going out and smelling to see if they can find drugs buried beneath the foundation of a house.
Not only that, but if a dog gets lost, they don't come back or they're not able to find home based off of what they see. They can come home because they can differentiate between multiple different smells to be able to find the scent of their home. Right. So if you think of like tracking capabilities, and some animals, I think inherently can use, like sonar or memory, but I feel like a lot of animals might use scent to be able to get back to where they need to go, or like trying to find. I think about like, a wolf in its litter. Yeah. They know that wolf imprints the smell of their young, right? And a lot of animals do, depending on how powerful their sense of smell is, right? Yeah. And so I know for a lot of animals and dogs, I remember reading this, and again, I might have to fact check, but that they're able to find their way home because of the sense of smell. Now, I don't know if I were to you have a good sense of smell, Colbs, and I know you can differentiate between your different soaps and your colognes, but if I were to put you, let's say 3 blocks away from the house and blindfold you and put Ranger at the same spot with you and had him find home, I think he'd find home way faster. I don't even, truthfully, as powerful as your nose is, I don't think he'd be able to get home.
Oh, 100%. There's no way that I could navigate simply by smell, at least not at my current level of training. And even if I could, well, there are ways to train, right? Blindfold, cut out, right? If you do sensory deprivation and really train it up, I mean, that's what a sommelier does. A sommelier is somebody who...
yes.
For our viewers, if you're not familiar with that term, someone who takes wine and is able to distinguish the different parts about that. We're going to become sommeliers together. Perhaps not just with wine and with other things, but we're going to do that together. But even so, I think you're totally right that his ability to pick up from a far distance or a small concentration would far surpass our ability.
But, what's interesting, and I have 2 points that I would love to bring up, is but I also wonder, because we don't have to rely on certain senses, do we not train ourselves to use them? So when I think about folks that may be blind, right? They usually have a heightened sense of hearing or smell.
That's right.
Because they rely on different senses, or or feeling, vibrations. They rely on those to get where they need to go and walk around. They know where different things are in the house. They can walk around, find whatever they need again, but they're using different senses. Yeah. And then the whole time that you were just speaking and talking about this specifically, there's a prolific quote I thought about, and that quote is, "Can you smell what the rock is cooking?"
Okay. Give us the background on that one, PJ.
Because you're just talking about a bunch of different smells. So I think sometimes we forget about the great things that we grew up with. And, if you can smell what the rock is cooking, you're connecting your sensory with when it comes to danger. And usually when the rock, gave certain signals, he was going to throw down the people's elbow back in the day. Just disregard this comment from
no, this needs to be in there.
100%.
But it makes you think, if you can smell what the rock is cooking, you're using your senses.
I want y'all to know that just aged someone here.
Yep.
Maybe so.
Nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that. Excuse me, you may know him as Dwayne Johnson and not The Rock. Excuse me.
Yes.
All right, I know him as The Rock. Come on now. I don't think I really knew him when he had hair, though. I've known his nice, shiny head stage.
Yep. Got it.
If The Rock sees this, I think you look great.
Yep. One of the most popular men in the world, I think.
Yeah.
He's great.
Yeah. He's a crazy workout ethic.
Yes,
so,
he does.
Focus.
Have you ever seen his videos?
Yeah.
They're phenomenal. Focus. It's great.
Yeah.
Okay. One thing before we probably want to wrap up. Speaking about the emphasis on certain senses needed for navigation, like you said, right? So somebody who can't see might rely more on other senses. We know that Daredevil is a superhero that relies on basically sonar, right? His sense of hearing to be able to navigate the world around him in
Spoiler alert.
Well, that's exactly who he is. Like that's a superpower.
Yeah. I didn't know about that.
Oh yeah, that's what he's all about. So, Marvel, DC, you guys might need to duke it out, but I think that we need a superhero who navigates and has a supernatural sense of smell.
That's Tanjiro.
That is
Not
Tanjiro.
DC or Marvel.
So now we're talking about anime. Okay, Tanjiro. Actually, that's a very good point. We may need to do a segment on Demon Slayer.
I think, for anime lovers out there.
Yeah.
Hey, we watch anime.
That's great.
PJ's like, I do not associate.
Anime is great for some people.
Anime, I think we're not talking about anime. I'm going to stop here.
No, it's all good. It's all good. It's all good. They're getting a round picture of who we are.
There's nothing wrong with anime.
There's nothing wrong
There's
with
some
anime.
good ones. I've seen, is this anime Avatar? Is that anime? No.
It's anime adjacent.
It's like,
I agree.
It's like
more
commercial.
cartoon.
It's like commercial anime. Like,
I think it's definitely more of a cartoon because anime, there is particular cultural like images and the way that the characters process. I think that's the biggest difference where you'll hear the storyline in their brain. Like there'll be moments of time that'll pause and the character will actually speak. Not directly to the audience, but they'll speak what they're thinking, what they're saying, and it's like a second can be stretched out. Like sometimes like 5 minutes can be like maybe 3 or 4 seconds, depending on what.
But Dragon Ball Z is like anime.
Yes, Dragon Ball Z is, and I was going to mention that Goku powering up and screaming for like 3 minutes at a time, that's a good example of the time pause. He's not actually doing that for 3 minutes. It's probably a shorter amount of time, but we're trying to get the understanding of him powering up. I don't know how this has to do with scent.
Nothing. This might be a little.
It was a person that you mentioned. I don't
Tanjiro.
Tanjiro. Yeah.
Yes.
But back to DC and Marvel potentially having a smell superhero. I was gonna make fun of you actually.
Yeah.
So maybe what are they gonna do?
Honestly,
Headbutt
there may
people
be
with
one
their
out
nose?
there. If y'all who are more knowledgeable about the superhero realm than we are know that there's already such a superhero out there, we would love to know and maybe do a segment on that. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
They can do maybe a this is what we call an anime, but maybe a cartoon with that hero, and maybe Dwayne Johnson can play them.
He'll
be the voice.
That would be fantastic.
All right, hey, we gotta copyright this, you know.
We do. We need to have some intellectual property here.
Who knows? Maybe someone's gonna run with this idea, and they're like, "Hey, pilot episode 2. I guess this isn't technically our pilot episode, but episode 2 of the Olfactory Odyssey.
Yep.
Shout out,
Yep.
but we don't get any money, so we should probably.
All right. Well, that's enough banter from us. We've exhausted ourselves of any meaningful conversation here. But we want to thank you all for being a part of this Odyssey. We're glad that you came back for a second episode. We'd love to see you back here again on our third. So stay tuned. But be sure to like and subscribe this video. That really helps us to gain traction so that more people can join us on this Odyssey. And we want as many people to enjoy this content as we possibly can. Again, also find us on TikTok, find us on Instagram, and you can also find this podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well, coming very soon. So keep an eye out for that. And feel free to share this content with your friends if you think that they're going to enjoy it. We've heard really good things from the people who heard the first episode. So it's not just us who's saying this is interesting. It's other people too.
It may be our siblings, but you know.
Hey, they're the people who are going to be the most honest if we are terrible. So I think that's a good reference for us. All right, thanks everybody. We'll see you next time on Olfactory Odyssey.